Hello, this is Pastor Micah from Life Journey, United Church of Christ. Just wanting to share a midweek reflection, to pause and center a moment in the midst of our busy week. This past week in worship, we reflected on the story of the life of Moses and of Israel as they were in an in-between place, no longer enslaved in Israel, and yet not in the promised land. We saw how, when the people cried out in desperation for food and for comfort, God opened their eyes to resources of food and comfort in the wilderness that they were in, that wilderness already held, but which, in their looking for blessings to come in only the terms they were familiar with, they did not see. We found in our sermon Sunday how in being open to resources they had not yet seen, and in sharing what they found equally among all the people, they discovered there was more than enough for all. This coming week, we will turn to the story of Samuel, one of the greatest prophets of biblical history, and how he first met God's voice speaking in his heart as a young man. We will see, among other things, how it took others, such as Samuel's mentor, Eli, to help him recognize what he was experiencing as God's voice in his life. It took a community to help him discovering his calling, helped him discover his calling and his vocation. It took a whole community to help him find his voice. As we pause now, in the midst of a week that is so busy, it is also in the midst of in-between times. These stories remind me of two challenges we face. First, we face the challenge of trusting that there is enough, that God will provide for this transition time we are all in, if we are open to giving and to sharing. Speaking of this principle, one of my favorite theologians, Jürgen Moltmann, writes in his book, The Source of Life, the belief that there is never enough for everyone makes people lonely. It isolates them and robs them of relationship. The opposite of poverty isn't property. The opposite of both poverty and property is community. For in community we become rich in friends, in neighbors, in colleagues, in comrades, in brothers and sisters. Together as a community, we can help ourselves in most of our difficulties. For after all, there are enough people and enough ideas, capabilities, and energies to be had. They are only lying fallow or are stunted and suppressed. So let us discover our wealth. Let us discover our solidarity. Let us build up communities. Let us take our lives into our hands and at long last out of the hands of the people who dominate and exploit us. You know, it is easy to circle wagons, to shut doors, to hoard our energy, our time, our talent in these times we are in, rather than opening our hearts, our lives, our time, our homes, our cupboards to those around us. And by opening, I do mean opening to give, yes, but also opening to receive. You know, being open to receive is so important this week too. I record this message on National Coming Out Day, although it will be shared later. A National Coming Out Day is a day in which our friends and allies in the LGBT community and those of us who are LGBT remember their journeys, our journeys, to come out as our deepest selves, unafraid, telling our stories to others. As a church, we are founded on the principle of being a place where all are welcome, unapologetically, with what makes them different, our sexual orientation, our gender identity, our race, our background, our whatever. It's not being a barrier, but including a gift. It is in these times when we are stretched to the bone, when many of us are exhausted, when it is easy to forget to have this open heart. It can be so easy to put our hands in our pockets and not do what we can to support this vision. To show up, to give, to share, to serve. It can also be forget to ask others and to be open to them. To keep making room for new people, to find a place, to find a voice, to lend a hand, to share. Yet that fire of inclusion, of justice, of welcome is still so needed and so important in these times. Let's open our hearts, open our hands, and open our lives as together we continue this vision. And I want to point out the painting behind me. I have it up in my entryway, my home. And it is a picture of inclusion. This is a painting of the Trinity. And in it, as you'll see, it pictures God in three persons, which is what we celebrate in the church. But it pictures God in the shape and form of every gender and race and culture, sitting around a table. And if you look carefully, that table is open. There's more than enough for them and to share. And that open space is for us and for all the world. And so when we have open hearts and lives, we're not only fulfilling that calling, but we're embracing the abundant life of our God, Creator, Christ, and Spirit, who always makes room for us. We awake this morning because God has welcomed us into it. And thus, we should always embrace others, making room for them to share in our life and share in the abundance God freely gives. Let's do that together today and all our days. Amen? Amen. Hope to see you Sunday or at one of the many ministries we offer through the week. God bless.